main sponsor.
25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
LB Lasa Isaru and unparalleled reward for a trusted deposit.
Your hygiene partner.
Introducing new Safeguard 100 grams, rupees 175 only.
Good evening and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1. For the News First team, I'm Newsfirst.lk. Before we head into stories in detail, let's start off with a look at tonight's headlines.
Five people dead and 61,000 affected by adverse weather. Petrol and auto diesel prices reduced. Tamil Nadu worried over increased presence of Chinese sea cucumber projects in Sri Lanka. Draft rehabilitation law would spur abuse, warns Human Rights Watch. Government analyst called in to identify those involved in the IUSF protest.
මේ විදියට නම් තරුණ පරම්පරාව මර්ධනය කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ කියන්න කැමති තවදුරටත් අපි අපේ අරගලය නවත්තන්නේ නැහැ.
Multiple factions call on the government to call for elections.
Starting off with your top story tonight, 5 people have died and another 61,000 people have been left affected following torrential rainfall that battered Sri Lanka over the weekend. News First's Ruhaza Irfan joins us with the details.
Many areas across the island experienced heavy downpour over the last few days. However, the bad weather condition in Colombo ceased, but a few hours later, Colombo was battered again by heavy rain, inundating several roads. Over 60,000 have been displaced due to the torrential downpour, and DMC says that they are ready to provide relief to those who have been affected. Let's now take a look at the situation across the island.
An individual who went for a swim in an inundated marsh in Sapugaskanda died after drowning in the flood. Sri Lanka police said the deceased had visited the location on Sunday evening with another group. The deceased is a 36-year-old resident of Ayagama, Ratnapura. A 26-year-old man died after he drowned in the wooded bridge canal in Navagamua. The body of the man who had gone for a swim in the canal was recovered on Sunday evening by local residents. The water levels of the Attanagalu Oya remain high following a torrential downpour on Sunday and Monday. Rising water levels inundated several areas along the Gampaha Kandana and Gampaha Jayala main roads. A tributary of the Attanagalu Oya flowing through Katana Kimulapitiya has overflowed, inundating several houses and low-lying areas. Intermittent showers were experienced in the Galle district today. The recording at the Ging River water gauge located in Baddegama measured 3.5 meters on Monday morning. With the rising water levels of the Ging River, lowlands in Ganegama and Wakwella areas remain inundated. This is how the Wakwella bridge was blocked by debris. Multiple areas along the Ambalangoda Batapola and Galle Alpitiya road were inundated. News First correspondents reported that the water levels of the Nilwala river continue to rise in Matara. Several areas in Talagahagoda and Katuangoda were flooded earlier today. Fishermen of Totamuna did not set out to sea even today due to rough seas around the Matara area. The landslide warnings issued to Kalutara, Nuwara, Ratnapura, Galle and Colombo as well as other districts continue to be in effect. The Disaster Management Centre said Level 3 red warnings have been issued for landslides in Ingiriya, Walallavita, Palindanuwara and Bulat Sinhala regional secretariats. The Department of Irrigation also stated that there is a risk of inundation of lowlands along the rivers if rain continues. The island is experiencing the inter-monsoon period these days. In the evening or at night, rainy conditions will prevail all over the island. We are expecting heavy rains in western and Galle Matara districts and some places in the Sabaragamu and central provinces, and there is a possibility of rainfall between 50 to 75 millimeters. Temporary strong winds and thunderstorms may also occur. Showers or thunder showers at places may occur along the coastlines from Puttalam to Potuvil through Colombo. there may be a possibility of the sea being a bit rough. Signs of rainfall increasing over the next few days are currently highlighted in our analysis.
අඩු වැඩි වීමෙන් පවතින ලකුණු තමයි අපිට දැනට අපේ විශ්ලේෂණවල ඉස්මතු වෙන්නේ.
The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and Lanka IOC have reduced the prices of petrol and auto diesel.
Sri Lanka's Ministry of Power and Energy has decided to reduce fuel prices with effect from Monday night. 1 litre of 92-octane petrol was reduced by 40 rupees to 370 rupees per litre. 1 litre of auto diesel was reduced by 15 rupees to 415 rupees per litre. Prices on other petroleum products will remain the same. Lanka IOC also reduced the prices of 92-octane petrol and auto diesel to the CPC rates.
The Petroleum Products Special Provisions Amendment Bill is to be presented to the Parliament tomorrow.
Petroleum trade unions warned that the controversial Petroleum Products Special Provisions Amendment Bill is to be presented in Parliament on Tuesday the 18th by the government. They claim that this bill takes away the government's power to the petroleum sector. The demise of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation will be marked after tomorrow. That is why we ask public representatives of this country to please express your opposition to this bill. Any company that comes forward does not come forward because they love this country, but to loot the money from this country and to take it to their own. The minister has an urgent need to break up 1,320 filling stations that fall under the ownership of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the private sector, and bring other companies like the Indian Oil Company to this country. Representatives of several trade unions belonging to the Inland Revenue Department filed a complaint with the Director of the Criminal Investigations Department. The complaint was based on several facts included in a statement made by Parliamentarian Mahindananda Alutgamage regarding tax collection of the Inland Revenue Department. That information is actually related to the Inland Revenue Act number 24 of 2017, especially regarding confidentiality of taxpayer information. Department officials are committed to protecting sensitive information and personal information regarding tax returns. That is why we handed this over to the Director of the Criminal Investigation Department. In December 2019, the government introduced new tax amendments, tax concessions, tax cuts, and lost around 600 billion rupees in revenue. It is a serious collapse. The 2021 revenue decreased by around 700 billion. If the wrong amendment in 2019 had not been made, by 2021, a tax income of 1,400 billion would have been collected. That is why we say, do not mislead society by presenting wrong statistics.
The Galevela Joint Farmers Organisation staged a demonstration on Monday, emphasising the need of fertiliser for cultivation. Farmers marched from Galevela intersection to the main bus terminal to protest. Thereafter, the group visited the Muttumariamman Kovil for religious observances. According to our correspondent, the group then walked to the Galevela Divisional Secretariat, but they were not permitted to enter inside by the police. A few representatives later got the opportunity to Kasun Aryaratna.
බොරුවට මහින්ද අමරවීර ඇමතිවරයා මාධ්‍යයට ප්‍රකාශ කරනවා අපි මේ හෙට් යාවකට 170ක් දෙනවා කියලා. ඒක නිකන් බොරු කතාවක් විතරයි. අපි ඉස්සලා යූරියාද යොදන්නේ මේ ගිහිනකොට. නෑනේ. එතකොට ඒ පොහොර වර්ග කිසිවක්. ඔය ගොවිජන සේවා මධ්‍යස්ථාන තුනෙන් එකකවත් නෑ.
අපේ තියෙන සුළු වර්මාන. ඒ සුළු වර්මාන වල ජල එන මුදුනාම අපි කරන්නේ පොදුකාරක ලීන් වලින් වතුර ගැටේ. භූමිතල අපිට විශේෂයෙන් අවශ්‍ය. ඔය නියම අවශ්‍යතාවය ඒ කන්නේට මේ වෙනකොට අපි අරන් ඉන්න තියෙනවා. ඒක බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා හම්බ වෙයි ගොවිය.
Later, the group dispersed after handing over the letter.
Now, Sri Lanka has been ranked 64 in the 2020 Global Hunger Index, and last year Sri Lanka was ranked at 65. Newsfirst Senator Senanaika has more.
In the 2022 Global Hunger Index, Sri Lanka ranks 64th out of 121 countries with sufficient data to calculate 2022 Global Hunger Index scores. With a score of 13.6, Sri Lanka has a level of hunger that is moderate. The Global Hunger Index is a tool designed to comprehensively measure and track hunger at global, regional and national levels. GHI warned that the situation is likely to worsen in the face of overlapping global crises, conflict, climate change and the economic fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Sri Lanka's worst economic crisis in decades has imperiled the country's national school meals program, among other key national safety nets, almost forcing people out of work. In Sri Lanka, the country's worst economic crisis in nearly a quarter century has left 6.3 million people, or nearly 30% of the population, food insecure. Food inflation in August soared to a record 94%. As Sri Lanka moves up the global hunger index, more and more Sri Lankans are saying that food, one of the basic necessities of life, is becoming unaffordable. Meanwhile, today, farmers' organizations have expressed that they are uncertain about the coming cultivation season. Where is Sri Lanka heading in terms of hunger and food insecurity? Senitha Senanayaka, Newsfirst, Colombo.
Thank you, Senitha. Sri Lanka has suffered through one of the world's worst economic crises for most of the year, marked by soaring inflation, food and fuel shortages and low supplies of foreign reserves. Now, most Sri Lankans are now skipping meals simply because they cannot afford 3 meals a day. The Gum at the door-to-door teams came across many households in rural Sri Lanka that have been battered by the economic crisis.
This was the scene at a village in Hambantota when the Gum at the door-to-door team visited the area. The 6th edition of the Gum at the Door-to-Door program, together with the University of Peradeniya, visited multiple locations in the Kurunegala, Trincomalee and Hambantota districts on Monday. The Gum at the Door-to-Door team visited the Galveva Grama Seva division in Mayurapura. The main issue these people face is the constant threat of encroaching wild elephants. The Gum at the team in Trincomalee visited the rural communities in Kallarava, Tennammaravadi, Kallampattu, Gomaran Kadavala and Pulmunde. The team that visited Kallarava on Monday morning observed that most of the people living there are day wage earners and the economic crisis has made life difficult for them. These people have only one thing in mind, and that is to have a good night's sleep without skipping dinner. These families will only be able to cook a meal if they get their work on a daily basis. However, today's day labor rarely comes by, and whatever they are paid is not enough to put a meal on the table. Therefore, most of these families are constantly in hunger.
With that, let's toss over to a short commercial break. Do stay with News First. We will be right back.
News First, main sponsor.
25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
මොකද මහත්තයා මේ?
නෑ මේ ගෙදර සිංක් එකේ
අයි මහත්තයා ස්ලෝන් නෙමෙයිද දැම්මේ?
හදිස්සියට බාලා පයිප්පයක් දැම්මේ. නැද්ද මුදලාලි ඊයේ පෙරේදා කඩේ රිපෙයාර් කරන්න ගෙනාපු ගම් චුට්ටක්.
මේ වගේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට හොඳම විසඳුම ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටක්. හැබැයි ඉක්මනින් දාගන්න ස්ලෝන් පයිප්පයක්.
ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටා හැම ගෙදරකම සිටිය යුතු ජලනල කාර්මිකයා දැන් ළඟම ග්‍රොසරියෙන් මිලදී ගන්න.
25% for 2 months, 25.5% for 4 months. Valuable FD.
Welcome back to the news. 2 adults and a child died in a tragic motor accident today. Two senior citizens aged 70 and 71 and a 3.5-year-old child tragically died in a motor accident in Ella, located on the Anuradhapura Padiniya road. The deceased were identified as residents from Airport Road in Anuradhapura.
I saw the car move to the side and it was not speeding, but sometimes when you fall asleep you accidentally speed up. That's what would have happened. The small child died.
The car collided with a tree along the Anuradhapura Padini road while travelling to Anuradhapura. The two injured women were rushed to the Kurunegala hospital for treatment. The Maha season has begun, but the farmers in many areas are in dire straits. Their main problem seems to be the fertilizer problem. This problem, faced by the farmers of Matale, Vilgamur, Hadungamur, represents the problems faced by farmers in many provinces. These farmers took loans during the previous season in order to harvest their fields. However, due to the fertilizer problem, the farmers did not get a good harvest as expected. Farmers say that the harvest received is not enough to pay off the debt or even for their meals. They say their only hope is the Maha season, but their efforts are futile and they are further burdened with debt. Farmers point out, even though the government has announced that it will default agricultural loans, the loans obtained from agricultural banks that do not belong to the main banking system have not been defaulted in the same way. Villagers say there are officials who have decided not to issue fertilizer if the farmers fail to pay their loans.
The farmers were helpless because of the stupid decisions. They were told that loans will be defaulted, but it was not done so.
Now, the farmers have to take loans from the Obituary Society.
Those who rob the central bank are free, those thieves are set free, and the farmers are taken to courts.
Still in local news, the US Defense Department has made a donation of medical equipment to the Sri Lankan Health Ministry.
To support the urgent medical needs of Sri Lankans throughout the country, a donation of medical equipment from the US Department of Defense to the Sri Lanka Ministry of Health was handed over on Monday. The US Ambassador to Sri Lanka, Julie Chung, graced this occasion and handed over the donations, and at the hospital, Ambassador Chung met with officials representing the Ministry of Health, doctors, nurses and other medical professionals from wards that will benefit through the equipment.
Sri Lankan American diaspora groups in the US have come together to donate medical equipment and supplies to Sri Lanka during this time as well. Non-profit organizations who thousands of miles away may have never even been to Sri Lanka or heard of Sri Lanka, but they have heard there's a time of need and they wanted to help. Not only the physical health, but the spiritual health, the mental health. The health of a nation is at stake. The United States has been a friend through thick and thin, through years past. We are a friend now, and we will always be a friend. So I stand before you, not just as the U.S. ambassador, but as your humble friend, who appreciate the kindness and goodness of the Sri Lankan people since I've been here, just in the past few months.
The equipment, which will enhance medical services of hospitals and clinics throughout the country, includes ECG machines, multi-para monitors, a defibrillator, spinal boards, infusion pumps and oxygen cylinders, among other medical equipment.
Human Rights Watch said that the Sri Lankan government should withdraw a draft law that would give the authorities broad powers to detain people in military-run rehabilitation centres.
Human Rights Watch said that the Sri Lankan government should withdraw the proposed Bureau of Rehabilitation Bill submitted to Parliament on the 23rd of September 2022, would allow the compulsory detention in centres of drug-dependent persons, ex-combatants, members of violent extremist groups and any other group of persons. It also said that the Bureau of Rehabilitation Bill would establish a new administrative structure controlled by the Defence Ministry to operate rehabilitation centres staffed by military personnel. The proposed law, which human rights advocates have already challenged in the Supreme Court, does not describe the basis of being sent for rehabilitation, but other recent government policies provide vague and arbitrary powers to forcefully rehabilitate people who have not been convicted of any crime. Meenakshi Ganguly, South Asia Director at Human Rights Watch, said, quote, "The Sri Lankan government's proposed rehabilitation efforts appear to be nothing more than a new form of abusive detention without a charge," end quote. She said that the rehabilitation bill would open the door widely to more torture, mistreatment and endless detention. Human Rights Watch said that the rehabilitation bill is the latest measures in a long history of laws such as the Prevention of Terrorism Act, also known as the PTA, that authorizes arbitrary detention and torture in Sri Lanka. The law could be used to target minority communities or anti-government protesters whom President Ranil Wickremesinghe has labelled extremists. The Human Rights Watch said the Bureau of Rehabilitation Bill and the proposed amendment to the anti-narcotics legislation are only the latest measures in President Wickremesinghe's assault on fundamental rights.
Moving on, multiple factions have emphasized on the need to call for an election to elect a government that is reflective of the people's mandate.
We urge the government to call for an election because this government consists of leaders and representatives the people do not want. If a general election is held, the people can give a fresh mandate and appoint fresh representatives. We do not see any obstacles to hold an election. All opposition parties have spoken out on the importance of an election. If the government has the ability to hold a referendum, it can call for an election because the costs are similar. The president will only be empowered to dissolve parliament in February and call for an election. However, if a majority in parliament wishes to call for an election, it can be held at any moment.
හැබැයි පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ බහුතරය විසින් තීන්දුව කරනවා නම් පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරු සියලු දෙනා එකතු වෙලා තීන්දුව කරනවා නම් මැතිවරණයකට යා යුතුයි කියලා ඒක ඕනෑම මොහොතක පැවැත්වීමේ හැකියාව තිබෙනවා.
The same people who claim they will win an election must go in front of a mirror to see those who oppose an election. If parliament agrees, it can be dissolved. The Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is with us. We are the majority. If they believe victory is certain, they should dissolve parliament. We can then gauge who the real victors are.
තවත් කල්මරන්න නැතුව වහම පාර්ලිමේන්තුව ඉස්රෝ ආරින්න. ඒතර අපි කාටවත් බලාගත හැකි කාගේ දිගපල්ල.
13 activists of the Aragalia were called to the Government Analysts Department today.
The group arrived at the Government Analyst Department in a police bus at 12:30 this afternoon. We came here today in connection with the protest organized by the Inter-University Student Federation, which took place on the 18th of August. We know that 17 people were arrested. The information regarding 13 people was recorded here today to confirm the evidence related to that case. No one understands the purpose behind this interest by Ranil Rajapaksa. We would like to say that if the young generation is being suppressed this way, then we will not stop our struggle. Please stop this nonsense.
Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa says that under the Samagi Janabalavegya, an education system centered on modern technology will be created for all schools in Sri Lanka. He made these remarks while attending a program held in Ratnapura colony.
Another bus was gifted to the Kolonna National School by opposition leader Sajid Premadasa under the Sakpala program today. This is the 37th bus donated under this program. In our government, we give priority to education. We give priority to health sector. What is my promise to the 4.3 million school children of the country today? An English-centric education at an international level, an IT-centric education, English language laboratories in every school, and robotics, artificial intelligence, 5G, augmented reality, virtual reality. It should be stated at this time that these new methods will definitely be brought to more than 10,100 public schools in this country.
Virtual reality අන්නේ අලුත් ක්‍රමවේද මේ රටේ තිබෙන රජයේ පාසල් 10100ට වැඩි ගණනකට අපේ කාලයක් තුල අනිවාර්යෙන්ම අපි රැගෙන එනවාමයි කියන එක මේ අවස්ථාවේ ප්‍රකාශ කරන්නට ඕන.
Opposition leader also played a game of cricket following the event.
Moving on, Tamil Nadu says it is worried over the increased presence of Chinese army in Sri Lanka.
Tamil Nadu has flagged serious security concerns over the increased presence of the People's Liberation Army of China in Sri Lanka. The Hindu website reported that an alert issued by the state intelligence agency a few days ago said the activities of the Chinese in the neighboring country is a concern to national security and called for an intensified vigil along the coastline. The advisory sent to all cities and districts in the state said the movement of PLA cadres and deployment of high-tech gadgets such as satellites, drones and other communication equipment in northern Sri Lanka required constant surveillance in coastal districts. Citing sources, the alert claimed that the PLA deployed sophisticated gadgets in the garb of launching sea cucumber farming. The security advisory comes days after an alert was issued by the same agency warning that a handful of Chinese nationals had clandestinely entered India via the sea route with the assistance of cadres belonging to a Sri Lanka-based political party. The free movement of Chinese nationals in many parts of the northern Sri Lanka, including Mullaitivu, Purutthiithivu, Analaithivu, Meesalai and Chevakacheri, had triggered discontentment along Tamil fishermen. They had expressed the apprehension that the Chinese were exploiting the rich sea wealth which is their only source of livelihood. Additional Director General of Police and Chief of Tamil Nadu Coastal Security Group Sandeep Mittal said it was not a disputable fact that the presence of Chinese nationals was increasing in Sri Lanka. The Hindu reported that frequent visits of the Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka to islands close to the international maritime boundary line and a drone survey conducted in the area in the guise of assessing prospects of harvesting sea cucumber made developments suspicious.
On the 16th of December 2021, Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Kee Zen Hong, visited the controversial sea cucumber hatchery in Aragalia, Jaffna. During the observation visit, he said that it was the beginning for Sri Lanka and China to start working together for a better future. What is happening in Sri Lanka's neighborhood? Earlier this year, Sri Lanka was hit by its first economic crisis since independence in 1948, as authorities disregarded the warnings from experts. Depleted foreign currency reserves meant Sri Lanka could not bring in essential imports. On the other hand, the current Sri Lankan government had absolutely no fixed means of income. Sri Lanka is expected to settle $34 billion worth of international sovereign bonds and development bonds that were obtained bilaterally and from open markets. However, the island nation is in no position to settle these bonds, and Sri Lanka is currently discussing means of obtaining relief to settle its debt. On the 23rd of September 2022, the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and the Finance Secretary attended a creditors' meeting to explain Sri Lanka's position, and it was revealed that 52% of Sri Lanka's debt is owed to China. Sri Lanka is now in talks with the Paris Club, a group of officials from major creditor countries, in order to reach a relief program to settle its bilateral debt. However, there lies one issue. China is not a member of the Paris Club. The International Monetary Fund, also known as the IMF, said that Sri Lanka should kick off debt restructuring talks with its bilateral lender China. 12% of Sri Lanka's bilateral debt is from Sri Lanka's closest neighbor, India. Although India is not a member of the Paris Club, it has always encouraged progressive steps on Sri Lanka with respect to the International Monetary Fund and the Paris Club. However, the issue at hand now is how does Sri Lanka obtain debt relief? IMF staff and the Sri Lankan authorities have reached a staff-level agreement to support Sri Lanka's economic policies with a 48-month agreement under the Extended Fund Facility. However, debt relief from Sri Lanka's creditors and additional financing from multilateral partners will be required to help ensure debt sustainability and to close financing gaps. Therefore, it is paramount for Sri Lanka to access debt relief measures with China. President Ranil Wickremesinghe stated that he had recently discussed Sri Lanka's debt restructuring with the Chinese finance minister, and he is optimistic that the discussions in this regard would be concluded successfully. While Sri Lanka's economy is in such a state, India has expressed concern on China launching sea cucumber farming in Sri Lanka. So, what are these sea cucumber farms or hatcheries? Kaudarimune in the Poonarin Divisional Secretariat in Kilinochchi is significant due to its geographical position. At this location, a sea cucumber farm is in operation as a China-Sri Lanka joint venture, and its parent company is located in Aragalia, Jaffna. The distance from this location to Kaudarimune is around 6 nautical miles. At the same time, India stepped forward to launch a wind power generation project in the same area in Punareen, where a Chinese-funded project is taking place. India's Adani Group is already taking measures to invest in the project. Recently, fishermen in Jaffna revealed that an attempt is being made to launch a sea cucumber farm in Kites, Jaffna. On the 14th of October 2022, a special business delegation from India met with the Sri Lankan Fisheries Minister Douglas Devananda and expressed their interest to launch a sea cucumber farm in the north of the island. Every single location that either China or India decided to launch a sea cucumber farm is of significant importance to Sri Lanka economically as well as when considering national security and biodiversity. The Indian High Commission to Sri Lanka visited Adams Bridge for a special puja, and several months later, the Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka visited the same area by boat. The Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka also operated a drone from Point Pedro to observe the surrounding areas, while the Indian High Commission made several visits to both the north and east of Sri Lanka. This is where Sri Lanka stands due to various political action 7 decades after obtaining independence. They have been able to push the country to an economic precipice and finally drag it down to a state of humiliation in front of the entire world. What is finally happening now is that the priceless resources and assets of the country are falling into the hands of foreign forces.
Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India, Milinda Morogada, said that any security threat to India is a threat to Sri Lanka as well.
Sri Lankan High Commissioner to India, Milinda Morogada, has told the Times of India that any security threat to India is also a security threat to Sri Lanka. The Times of India said the High Commissioner had sought to reassure the Indian government that in line with their bilateral agreement and understanding, the island nation won't allow its ports to be used by a foreign country in any manner that is prejudicial to India's interests. Describing India as the key to sustainable economic recovery of debt-ridden Sri Lanka, the High Commissioner said that the strategically located country is exploring with Indian trilateral cooperation opportunities with Japan, Israel and the UAE. According to Morogada, Sri Lanka wants economic integration with India, which he said will allow the country to expand its existing economic model and ensure quicker recovery from the debt crisis it's facing. He said that the IMF package may not be huge, but a certificate of good economic engagement from the IMF is important, adding that it will encourage investment and also exports. Morogada added, Sri Lanka is looking to intensify cooperation with India in areas like tourism, electricity, petroleum and connectivity. The High Commissioner also said that had Sri Lanka integrated with the Indian economy, the island nation would have grown very fast.
Scotland created a major upset in the ongoing T20 World Cup today, defeating two-time world champions West Indies comprehensively. The encounter took place in Hobart, Australia under Group B of Round 1.
West Indies won the toss and decided to field first. Scotland openers George Munsey and Michael Jones took to the field, providing a stable start to the innings with a 55-run stand. George Munsey top scored for Scotland with 66 runs off 50. Alzari Joseph and Jason Holder claimed 2 wickets each. Scotland ended their innings with 160 runs on the board for the loss of 5 wickets. In reply, the Windies were only able to score 118 runs as they were bundled out by the 18th over by the Scotland bowling attack. Opener Kyle Mayers scored 20 runs while Brandon King was dismissed for 17. Captain Nicholas Pooran only managed to score 5 runs. Jason Holder top scored for the West Indies with 38 runs. The Scotland bowling attack managed to dismiss 5 West Indies batsmen for under 6 runs, with Mark Watt bagging 3 wickets for 12 runs. The second encounter of Group B saw Zimbabwe take on Ireland. Ireland won the toss and invited Zimbabwe to bat first. Zimbabwe ended their innings on 174 runs for the loss of 7 wickets, despite an early collapse, which saw their first 3 wickets fall for 37 runs. Sikandar Raza was the focal point of the Zimbabwe batting attack, scoring 82 runs in just 48 deliveries with 5 boundaries and 5 sixers.
Again, his favorite area in the Zilin Sikandar.
Chasing a target of 175 for victory, Ireland were dismissed for 143 runs. Ireland's top order wickets fell for just 22 runs. Curtis Camphor was Ireland's top scorer with 27 runs. Blessing Muzarabani bagged 3 wickets for 23 runs.
Another one, 2 and 2. Ends with pleasant runners.
Sri Lanka take on the UAE at 9:30 AM tomorrow in their second round 1 encounter. All the matches of the 2022 T20 Cricket World Cup can be viewed exclusively on Sirasa TV, the official broadcaster for Sri Lanka.
Jayagamu, Sri Lanka. Our boys will face the world at the T20 World Cup starting Sunday. Would you like to send Team Sri Lanka a 30-second clip of your creative wish to 0777 6020 and end your wish with Jayagamu Sri Lanka. We will show Sri Lanka and the world how Sri Lankans support Sri Lanka. Jayagamu Sri Lanka.
Now Sri Lanka will take on UAE at 9:30 AM tomorrow in their second round 1 encounter. All matches of the 2022 T20 Cricket World Cup can be viewed exclusively on Sirasa TV, the official broadcaster for Sri Lanka. In news overseas, hundreds of thousands of people took part in a protest march yesterday in Paris against the cost of living in France.
While the organizers, led by the head of the France Unbowed Party, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, put the figure at more than 140,000, French police said. Around 30,000 attended. Around 2,000 police officers took security measures during the march. The protesters chanted slogans against the police and the French President Emmanuel Macron. According to the reports, French author Annie Ernaux, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature this year, was among the demonstrators.
Taking a look back at your local news, President's Counsel Upal Jayasuriya, speaking to reporters this evening, reprimanded former Finance Minister and current Foreign Minister Ali Sabri for misleading the public in his recent statement, claiming that the cabinet was unaware of the economic crisis.
But Mr. Sabri, coming back to the statement that has been made by Mr. Sabri, he cannot and he shall not absolve himself of the responsibility of having to bear, as he says, that he is not, they were not unaware, they were not aware of what was going on until such time it reached March this year 2022. So Mr. Sabri has to take the full risk. Every time, whenever a decision was taken by the Monetary Board, it was submitted to the, from time to time, from 2020, and going on till 2022, every 2 weeks the Monetary Board is required to send letters and reports under section 64 and 68 of the Monetary Law. So Mr. Sabri cannot claim or absolve his responsibility stating to the nation that I was not aware of it. It is totally a palpably false statement that he has made. We never expected that as a lawyer that he would do that, because we expect certain amount of sincerity when making statements on these issues, which he has violated.
And with that, it's a wrap of Primetime News here on TV1. Take care and good night.